Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Sorry, my thing was muted. Guess let's give it another minute just to see if anybody else is going to join us here. In the meantime, I'm going to make some edits to the agenda document. Okay, if you want to refresh the main page, just basically added, I think the only two agenda items that we have for today, which are reviewing the sandbox applications for Rocket Chip and Chisel. So, Henry, we can probably go ahead and get started. I'll capture the meeting minutes on this one. Eventually, when we get larger, somebody from the TSC would do this, but in the meantime, for this one, I can take care of it.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure. All right, so Henry, you want to open the meeting?
Sure. I hereby call the second meeting of the Technical Steering Committee to order.
All right. So let's maybe get started here. Like I'd said, I think the first thing that you're going to want to address here is the TSC are going to be these two PRs. Maybe let's just take a look at them together and see what we got.
Yeah.
Can someone share the screen?
Sure. Just one moment. It'll take me a moment. There we go. Okay, on its way.
So in both cases, I think they only made it. So I'll confess that I did the rocket ship one. So I can
Okay.
speak to how far it got. It's easy to, as we predicted, it's very easy to do the sandbox application part. And then when you get to the second part, you're like, oh, we need to like go talk to other people or the other contributors. And that's what happened with the chisel one as well. But I think it's, so I guess one piece of feedback is it does seem, despite us intending to get everybody to the graduated state, it does seem like the sandbox part is much easier, which I feel like is what we predicted last time. So yeah, I think calculating the scale of usage is a little bit unclear. Is it number of users? Is it how they're using it? But Chisel does it, as we'll see, Chisel does a better job of tracking users and contributors. But yeah, I think the sandbox part is easy. The graduation part, yeah, rocket ship is still just missing a lot of those things, and we need to have a working group meeting to address them. But I filled out the sandbox part, so
sounds good. And I mean, I think that's part of the idea here. Really, is that it's the point of the sandbox stage is to give you time and space to be able to figure out the rest of those answers. So that's it's good that it's easy to get into, and that hopefully will make it easier to get those other answers for the graduation application.
Yeah, I think two other things that we encountered, if you scroll up a little bit to like the direction, maybe it's not visible here, but if we can get to a view where you can see what the original directions are, which I forget it. Yeah, I guess I removed them, but maybe if we go to the template.
All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, should download that one.
Yep. So one thing that's recommended here is projects applying for sandbox should add the sandbox application label. So is that supposed to be a GitHub label that's part of the TSC repo?
It is, yeah. Did we?
Because I don't think it's there. So one thing is I don't think it's there. I think there are only the generic GitHub labels at the moment. Second thing is that from my perspective, this would be fine. I could just add the label. But from right now, the person who's applying for Chisel doesn't have write access to this repo. So they cannot add a label themselves.
Okay, so then, all right, gotcha. That makes sense. So we should probably then, so we need to add those labels. And the person applying can't actually apply them. So a TSC member should put that on there.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe we should just change the direction to be, put something in your PR message, or I don't know. I feel like when you look at the PR, it's pretty obvious what what the goal and purpose of it is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. So maybe what we'd add up here, something like when you're ready for your application to be considered, ask a TSC member to add this label.
Yeah.
So that people have time to draft it, but also it's kind of clear when it's time to put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I mean, that's basically what the TSC meeting label is supposed to be for, but it would be good. Okay, you know what? Let me take a stab at this. I think I can probably rework this pretty easily.
It also raised the question to me of who is supposed to have write access to this repo, like in the long run. Is it TSC members? Is it Chips Alliance members? You know, just in terms of like, I feel like what that comes down to in practice is the mechanism by which one opens PRs. Does one do it against this repository, or does one fork this repository and then make a PR from their fork?
Yeah, so what I've seen in other projects, it's generally easiest for things like this to have anybody who is a regular contributor to the TSC have write access.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fine for it to be broad. I think we might have some branch protection rules in there that say that you need to put things through PRs, but I'll just double check on that. Other than that, really, there's not any harm in providing write access on this particular repo.
Yeah, because like in this case, I know that this is through special knowledge, so not a general process, but like I know that the chisel person submitting this PR is probably going to become their TSC representative.
Okay. So let me just, one thing we could do here would be to add some instructions on the front page on how to request write access. Because, really it should be pretty easy to give that. Okay.
Cool.
All right, cool. Anything else on that you want to talk about?
Not for Rocket Ship, but let's go look at the chisel one.
Okay. Let's see.
So similarly, they got as far as sandbox. So I think the interesting thing to talk about here is they do have multiple repos, but at the present time, the governance of them is really handled by the same set of people. So their feeling was like, they don't feel like they need to have distinct representation at the TSC level for each of these projects.
Yep.
So yeah, I told them it was fine to, just represent themselves as the working group. But any feedback you guys have about that, I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, so this brings up an interesting governance question of if there were something that required a TSC vote, is this one vote or is this three?
I think their feeling was they're content to only have a single vote.
Okay. So basically then we would treat them as a single project using the nomenclature in the charter. So they'd be a single project,
right?
Even though they're called Chisel Working Group.
Yes.
It'd be the Chisel Working Group project.
Okay. Yeah. So that's exactly what I was sort of wondering is like, should we just call it the Chisel Working Group project, or just to, I don't know, keep the taxonomy clear?
What about Chisel project?
Yeah, it could just be the Chisel project that happens to manage some other repos.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Chisel Working Group will be confusing, I think.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And it fits with the idea of let's do the thing that's the most straightforward and the easiest to understand. So, okay. All right, so I've got that in the notes. We could say call it Chisel project. Henry, do you want to have a talk with them about just pushing a patch on that PR?
Yeah, I'll ping Jack about that. Yep, and so they have a somewhat more comprehensive social media presence, etc. But basically, when he got to the graduation part, he was like, okay, we need to have a like working group meeting to go through all these items. So
Okay.
that should happen sometime in this next month.
Okay, sounds good. If they need somebody to come into the working group and talk about this, I mean, I assume that, that you're pretty actively involved in that, but certainly feel free to pull any of us in.
Yeah, I don't usually go to theirs, but I might go to this one if they have questions.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. So then I think at this point, really, I mean, there's not really probably anything stopping us from accepting either one of these sandbox applications, right? Really, the questions are all the graduated status.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just taking a look here to see, I believe we could simply vote on this. And consider them sandbox. And then at that point, what the process would look like here would be that we just land these PRs so that they have something to work against as they are making their revisions and so forth. I think another thing would be to certainly add Jack to the list of people with right access to the repo, make it a little easier to keep this thing up to date. And then really it's just a matter of following up and getting them the help that they need and the guidance that they need in order to get through the graduation application.
Yeah, I think the sticky parts for the graduation application were all the stuff, like the questions were related to intention, like do you intend to basically the questions on the form that are like, you know, do you intend to like sign over the trademark? Do you intend to, etc. Jack didn't feel like he could unilaterally say yes to that and wanted to have their governance vote on it, essentially.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to those particular discussions, please definitely do involve me. I have done this for a number of other projects, and sometimes this particular process sounds more intimidating than it actually is. So
Yeah.
I can certainly help with that as well, and with the mechanics of it.
Okay, maybe I will then try to get you and Jack synced up with regards to either questions he collects from them or like when they actually are planning to do the vote or that kind of thing. I think he's on the Chips Alliance Slack already, but I can introduce you guys.
Sounds good. Okay, so then that just basically brings us, I think, to the end of this process for both. So we put in the requirements to become a sandbox project are have to complete the project application template, which we've got here, and the PR has been opened. Project join the TSC meeting to present the proposal. We don't have Jack, but we do have you, Henry, presenting both of these. So I think we could probably consider that good enough. And that really just leaves approving the application as a sandbox project by majority vote. Are both of you comfortable with taking the vote right now?
I am.
I am too.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start with the first vote then. Let me get back to the PR. Let's start with Rocket Ship. Okay. So let's just go around and we'll just do a majority vote here. So Michael, are you comfortable with this? Do you vote to accept them as a sandbox project?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Henry?
Aye.
All right, thank you. So they're now a sandbox project, and Henry, you can go ahead and land that one.
Cool.
For Chisel, Michael, comfortable adding as a sandbox project?
Aye.
All right, Michael, or sorry, Henry?
Aye.
Great, let's go ahead and land that one as well. All right, well, that was pretty easy. And I think that's everything that I was aware of on the agenda for this particular meeting.
I assume we can kind of rename the file and everything just as we go, right? Because we were talking about calling it Chisel Project, not Chisel Working Group.
Yeah,
Technical details, really.
I'll either get Jack to open a PR or I'll just do it myself.
Yep.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, and Michael, I think that would fit. We have under here that the TSC is able to keep the keep the repos tidy and orderly. So I would consider this under tidy and orderly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just didn't want to block the vote, but
no, of course.
Just to make sure people don't panic when they see like working group. Oh, so I should just join with my working group now, which is not what they should do, but like just what Chisel wanted.
Yeah.
And it's probably not even all of the working group really. It's just like several projects, but there might be other projects that fall under the Chisel umbrella.
Yeah, they do have some other repos that are not particularly active that haven't even basically he did the 3 most active ones, which are also the ones that they transferred over to the Chips Alliance organization already. I think there's sort of a long tail of smaller like ancillary projects that I think the repos will get moved over at some point, but I don't think they'll apply for separate project status, or if they did, it would be like going straight to archive, if you see what I'm saying.
Yep.
But you're right that over time they might want to have other.
It's all a matter of common sense, I think. Like, as long as everyone agrees, and then the community might grow, and then like it might just make sense to separate things out differently. But it's a problem we can handle later. It's just the naming I care about, because like if it's just called Chisel Project, like everyone will understand it. It means that is the technical project of Chisel, and the fact that there's some ancillary projects, I think it's going to be the same in many cases. Like Swerve, for example, right? Like it's not really one repo; it's a bunch of different things and potentially useful tools. Like I doubt that all of those tools will suddenly try to join as a separate project. Probably won't happen. Or even if they try, we probably will say it doesn't make sense. You're part of the Swerve project.
Yeah. Somewhere in here, and I don't remember where it is, Michael, but we do have some language which says that it is the TSC's decision. So if we're going to lump projects together into a single, or lump repositories together into a single project, that's something where the TSC would make that decision based upon what keeps things neat and tidy. Yep. Okay. Actually, I thought of one other thing. So since the last meeting, I put together a couple of things here, which should hopefully make it easier to get people onboarded with the CLA for code-only projects and for spec and code projects. One of the things which we want to start doing here would be preparing each of these projects for the transition over to work under the Chips Alliance CLA. The single biggest piece of advice I can give here is the same one that I gave to the governing board, which is let's try and get as many of these documents signed in advance as possible, particularly for the active contributors, so that when we turn on the Easy CLA tool, productive work isn't getting blocked. So it's pretty straightforward. Really, all we have to do is open up, or all the person needs to do is open up a PR against these 2 repos, Easy CLA specs and code and Easy CLA code only. That will trigger the check to see whether they've signed the CLA, and if they haven't, then it will provide them with a link to do that. And there's also, I put in some instructions here as well to make it a little easier to figure out what you need to do. So Henry, I think this might be one thing we'd want to get back to both of them with. Just encourage people to just go open up trivial PRs against that repo. That'll make sure that their core contributors are covered, so that there's no disruption whenever we do actually migrate them in and turn this thing on. That make sense?
Yes.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah,
it's Rob. So no, that's good. So I'm just curious, is like Berkeley have they signed the CLA, or is that still kind of hanging out there?
That one is still hanging out there, so we'll
Okay.
have to follow up on that one.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is something that for the Chisel people, I think that they have a CLA. They're happy to switch to using this CLA. I do think that they will want Berkeley to have done the organizational sign-on before they activate it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, for Rocket Ship, I think there's less active Berkeley contribution right now. So, and the main developer does really wants the CLA to go active. So I think that can happen even before Berkeley has done the work.
Yeah, my question was related to the bag effort of Professor Nicklick too, and to see where that was. And I know that one of the challenges he has, of course, as you probably know, is some of the dependency on both Cadence and some Foundry data too.
Yeah, that's probably going to be a long process.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, well put.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I
Brian.
had to find the right window to make myself. So basically, yeah, there's I think a bunch of things we want to onboard that will have one problem or another, and bag is one of them. But we're working on solutions, so to say. One of the things that we were kind of discussing with Rob here is like with projects that we know are going to join, they just haven't yet. Just get them to do the chips commons thing for a while, just so that kind of we know they're in our orbit, so to say, and they know that too. And we're kind of trying to get people in. And one other thing that I think it would be good to discuss is also our ability to set up working groups that kind of anticipate communities that could potentially, congregate around Chips Alliance. And we've been talking to Silicon Nostra Labs and Infineon about this, where it would go a long way for them if we had some kind of, understanding that we are willing and happy to start a working group for analog design within chips, even though bag's not in yet because of various, hurdles we'll have to overcome. It doesn't mean people interested in using bag and so on can't meet under the auspices of Chips Alliance in a dedicated working group. So I think it's a good discussion to have here at the TSC, and of course also on the board level, which I think this week we have a board meeting too. But I think it would be good to at least cover it very briefly here, just to agree everyone's on the same page that we should be doing this, because there's a chicken and egg problem, as in many open source projects, really, where bag's not in yet. We do want it to be in, but it might take time. If we wait until that happens, perhaps those people go somewhere else, or they just get discouraged from working with bag. So expressing our interest in that area, which I think we have, it is a very, very challenging and interesting and useful, part of the entire chip development flow, to automate, those analog bits into generators that can be shared and reused. I think it fits extremely well into the mission of chips, and we shouldn't just be about digital. Nothing ever says anywhere that we're about just digital design. So having an analog working group would be a good thing to do.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to echo your statement, Sir Michael. So I think analog certainly is a key component of any chip design, as we all know, and historically it has been the long pole in terms of developing any given particular chip. So relative to formation of an analog work group, I think there's enough interested parties, both in terms of industry and also university, Berkeley certainly being at the forefront of that. But, I know as Michael knows that, UT Austin is also potentially interested in that as well, having done some work in the analog space too. So I think it makes sense to formulate a group to at least start the conversation and then take it from there.
Henry,
So
Brian, what do you think?
Sorry, repeat the question.
I just asked what you thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really see any reason to like prevent work groups from forming like that.
Yeah.
Like having as many work groups as possible seems purely good to me. So
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, especially that we have like 6 companies, let's say, interested in that field that could be working together as part of this. So it's not like I wouldn't necessarily want to create like purely anticipatory groups for stuff that isn't happening, but this is actually things that are like happening and
Right.
just pulling the conversation into Chips Alliance, but the conversation's already there. In a sense.
I'm always a big fan of stuff being like descriptive rather than prescriptive. So like if you have a group of people that want to meet regularly and are using Chips Alliance stuff or planning to have the stuff they produce be made available through Chips Alliance, that is, I think, descriptively a Chips Alliance working group and should be labeled as such. I think like so like putting too much gatekeeping around that I think is silly if people are actively trying to meet and work on something.
Yeah, it occurs to me, I don't know that we've ever written out what specifically a project or a work group can ask for in Chips Alliance. Have we done that? I don't think it's anywhere in the repo.
Not sure, probably not.
we really should. So I was thinking about that. So there are a number of things which we can, obviously do to help support the community. Provide them with, Zoom account or access to the Zoom account. Provide them with access to be able to live stream their meetings onto the Chips Alliance YouTube channel. Provide them with a mailing list. Provide them with, all these things like this, which we can really easily do. But we probably ought to write them out somewhere so that people know they can come ask for them. This is true for both projects and for working groups. I mean, that is certainly very much within the mission here. So I think we probably ought to add something, I would say, on the front page, get it fairly high up of the things which we can provide. We do say that we offer a number of tools, but we don't say how to ask for them.
Yeah,
I think that
Brian, would you be able to try to fix that?
I can fix that. That is easily fixable.
Brian, we're going to elevate you to hero status.
Oh, just here to help.
That counts as a hero.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, anyway.
No.
Sorry.
So, okay. So yeah, so let's maybe start with that one and say, here are the things which we can offer. Here's how you request them. If you want to set up a working group, here's how you do it. With that, I think it gives us the tools to do what you're asking for here, Michael, which I think is all around a really good idea.
Okay.
Anything else that we would need for that?
Just like if the procedures, like, because obviously these are not like formally affiliated entities or something. It's like it's a community of people within certain companies and universities that are like, as I think what their message was, we everyone tells us to join Chips, but like Bag's not in Chips, and like we're doing stuff with Bag, and so like, how's that work? And I guess like that's my attempt to answer this with like, well, we can have a working group that covers analog design and happens to use Bag a lot, and like whether Bag is a Chips Alliance project at this point or not doesn't really like matter, because we are using a lot of tools that are not within the Chips Alliance, and like they're still useful tools. to do the stuff that we need. The overarching goal is not to like pat a few projects on the back, is to do open source design of different kinds for ASICs, which analog is a big part of. So as long as the working group is about open source analog design, we're super happy to host that conversation. I'm not sure like who would be like, if you create like a formal process, I'm not sure if anyone is in a position to like apply, quote unquote, because they don't have like a formal forum. That's exactly why they might need a working group. So it's like
someone's planning to like host the meeting, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that someone someone of this group would host the meetings, but I think in a sense Chips Alliance would host the meetings, right? Like because we'd be, I don't know, giving them our Zoom account or something. I don't even think they require this, right? Like I'm not sure that that's the most important thing for them. I think the most important thing for them would be for Chips Alliance to admit that it cares about analog design before it actually like admits the first analog design project into Chips Alliance. Because we can't admit that project because of different kinds of hurdles that it's facing to actually join, shouldn't stop us from saying, hey, Chips Alliance, within Chips Alliance scope is also analog design. So we're creating a working group because we know there's interest in the community to do so. And then we can just connect those people up, and I'm sure they'll start using that infrastructure. I wouldn't want to make it into a formal procedure that they have to like sign a letter with blood, or you need at least like 5 people to or something, because it might turn out that this actually discourages them from doing that, because it seems fishy, like we haven't done anything yet and we're kind of telling them to do something. So I'd actually say the TSC seeing interest in the community and having like tangible proof of that interest, which we do. Like, I mean, Rob was in those meetings, I was in those meetings, and like we if you want to like join an email chain where we can discuss this, we can do that too. And then like I think it should be like the TSC can decide to set up a new working group to cover an area that hasn't been covered before. I think that's probably the process we should have.
Hey, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something, like let's say we get agreement to formulate or form an analog working group. Is that something from a public relations perspective we could publicize to attract interest, or do we try to keep that quiet?
No, we could and should. We could and should. I mean, I think after we establish it, we should try to get the first contributors and people like joining meetings, and then we should publicize it so that we don't accidentally run into the problem of what I was projecting didn't happen, and now we have a bunch of PR that's just empty words, right?
Okay. Yep.
I think it will happen. Like, I have no reason to assume that those people were joking and they don't want us to. Like, literally, Infineon and Silicon Austria kind of told us, we're gonna join Chips Alliance if you start a group like that. That's basically what it boils down to, right? So
correct.
Gating that, we might be excluding them from Chips Alliance. It's a chicken and egg, as in everything. So if we go and like, if we have a procedure as the TSC to say, hey, it seems like this topic is of interest and people are flocking to us and asking, why is Chips Alliance not doing this? We have the power, and I think it should be the TSC's power, to like set up a new working group and proactively like act to congregate people into that working group. Potentially, of course, draw projects in, like you suggested, Rob. There's those University of Texas projects, for example, which of course are not on Apache license. So we're not going to get them into chips in 5 minutes, but like we can at least start this procedure. We'll have a legitimate reason to do that, right? Because we'll have a working group, we'll have people joining to participate in that working group. We'll probably have meetings. I assume these guys will be very happy to set up a monthly meeting, but I can't, like tell them what to do.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
So I think it should be like, based on requests we get, the TSC can decide to do that. Like, actually that has happened before. So like in a bit rogue way, like Zvonimir sometimes puts like a new working group that we'd want to start in the future on those diagrams, right? That we have for Chips Alliance.
Right.
And what he means is that he wants Chips Alliance to be doing that thing, but like it's not doing it yet because, you know, there isn't perhaps enough momentum or projects that have joined and so on. And intuitively, I think he's getting that thing right. He wants to seed a specific topic, and you can't seed that topic without actually being a little bit proactive. But here we have this situation where the conversation is already happening, the demand is there, the interest is there, we have potential members. So like if we could go as the TSC and say, okay, there's a new working group that we're setting up, we can call it, you know, working group information in space formation, or some sort of denoting that it's like perhaps not fully established yet, but it's kind of being built, then I think we could go with that to those people and tell them, look, that's the gesture you're waiting for. Please join. You can join that group. You can be the people that help us like establish that forum, that conversation within Chips Alliance.
No, that makes sense. So is it a case where effectively the TSC has to hear a proposal for starting a working group and then vote on it, or what are the mechanics, I guess is the way to put it?
So the way that we're configured right now is that the definition of a work group is that it's something which contains at least one graduated project.
Okay.
And that was just, so the history here is the work groups were set up originally with the idea that this is just logical buckets of projects. So I'm not sure whether we'd want to use the same language. I recognize you've been saying working group versus work group. I'm not sure if we want to use the same language for this, or if we might want to say these are initiatives or something which means the same thing but uses a different word. Just to
So
keep things clean.
a work group really is not a collection of individuals or companies or participants who are interested in a given topic area. So you're saying that effectively something has to have been accomplished already for the work group to come into existence? Is that what you're saying?
The original idea was that if there were projects which were related to each other, that we would batch them together, so that they had some sense of identity within Chips Alliance. Whether this is, you know, hosting large group meetings so that there are fewer meetings scattered across the calendar, or you know, originally the idea was each work group would have one vote on matters that the TSC had to vote on. We've since scrubbed that for various reasons, but that was the original idea here behind the work groups. That said, this is not, you know, this is not a particularly firm thing that has to always stay this way. If we would prefer to use a different term, or if we're, you know, scrap the idea of work groups altogether, that's also an option. So really, I think the main question here really is just what's the least confusing long term, and let's go with that.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Michael. That's fine.
I'm kind of personally thinking of work groups as topical areas in a sense, and for me, they group n projects each, n being anything from 0 to infinity. I'm joking, but like it's more like I think at one point Zvonimir was proposing, hey, let's have a machine learning accelerator work group, right? And there is 0 projects in Chips Alliance that are kind of specifically machine learning accelerators at this point, which for me doesn't mean that we shouldn't have this group if enough people want to work on this. Like there might be projects that we actually actively go out and say, hey, that project needs to be created by people in Chips Alliance. It doesn't exist yet, but like it's so important that we should, you know, actively go and try to create this code to make this happen. And I'm not sure if like we want to gauge being a working group on having projects. It's a fairly unusual, so I'm not saying we're going to set up 10 working groups with 0 projects. It's more like because we could call them like special interest group or something. I'm not totally against that idea. It's just that for me, the work groups have always been like a topical area, and at the same time a bag for projects, because like one doesn't exclude the other, right? But since they don't have any voting rights, that's the whole point. Like, we have eliminated this problem of work groups actually giving anyone any power, other than perhaps having a Zoom account, right? Like, that's like, I don't consider that a problem. If we told people you can't have a Zoom account before you have one project, that's okay for me. But like, I wouldn't probably introduce another entity type, because it just, makes things confusing. But I don't know. I'm just, one vote here. I don't know what others think.
Easy enough to change the definition on this one. So I agree. Let's keep it simpler.
Yeah, maybe just add another level to the work group. That's maybe change just active to, I don't know. Like, we need a sub at, like, I would change active to be the, like.
Oh yeah, we have levels. You're
meeting-
right. Yeah,
meeting-
we could add like information, or I don't know.
I'd say like active is like regularly has meetings, and then like there's some level, I don't know what there's some level above that that's contains at least one graduated project.
Yeah, funny enough, like, we have no active work group.
Yeah, technically at the moment we have 0 active work groups, despite having a bunch of groups that are having meetings at the moment. So I feel like that's sort of the simplest way to slice it. And I agree with the overall point that since they don't have voting power, we might as well put them to service trying to describe the work that's actually happening.
Yeah, sounds good. So maybe we just say activist contains at least one graduated project or is actively meeting.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll just do pull request in this area, try to finalize the wording, and I like that idea. I forgot that we have work groups levels, because yeah, adding a level, as Henry said, is probably a nice idea. And then I assume that the analog one would be on this first level, and then like, very quickly, I assume someone would put a project into CHIPS Alliance that would be concerned with analog design, and then we could, or like they would start meeting, and by definition they'd become an active group. So it's just a technicality, really. It is not a formal process, nor is it a voting power giving thing. So I think we should be inclusive. Cool.
Yeah. So let's maybe also add something in there that just TSC votes, majority vote of the TSC to establish a new working group. And the reason I'm thinking this is just, it's not to create process, but it's just eventually access to things like Zoom accounts can become scarce resources.
Funnily enough, it says it also may create or consolidate work groups at its discretion. So you can just perhaps add wording like by majority vote. Add 3 words and we're done.
Easy. All right. So cool. Do you want to add that? Can I put you on the action for that, Mike? To
Absolutely.
make that PR? Cool.
Yep. So should I be making that PR, or do you want me to review?
Sure. No, go ahead. That's
okay. I'll probably do it tomorrow, but yep.
Okay. Related topic. So right now, I think the idea of taking Rocketship and Chisel through the project graduation process here was really, on one hand, we need to go through and get all the projects through this process formally, but also the idea was that it would be a reasonably, hopefully straightforward process for them, and we could uncover some of these questions and issues like we found earlier. Do we want to do the same for this idea of CHIPS Alliance Commons? It sounds like from what you're saying here, Michael, that there are a couple of projects where it would make sense to at least go through the process of indicating that we'd like them to be in the Commons. As I remember from our formation discussions here, we said it's something which CHIPS Alliance decides. We would call something to be, or define something to be within our Commons, don't necessarily need to go ask for the project to do anything. But it might be a good time to give that process a try and make sure that it works and that we're comfortable with all the different things that we are doing here. Do we want to maybe
Absolutely.
think for the next meeting?
Absolutely. We should try to figure it out by the next meeting. I mean, it's I think it should be a two-way street in the sense that, you know, if we just like, we should try to convince those projects not to shy away from that term. Otherwise, it'll feel like we're, you know, appropriating things, which is not the, you know, the intention, right? The intention is just to signify an already existing collaboration, so to say, that's just not consummated. So it's like it's not yet able to be formalized for some reason, like with BAG, right? It's more like if BAG agrees, if we agree, and I agree, we don't have a process for it yet, but we can try to figure one out. We should be able to talk about this. Like, this project is, you know, in Chips Alliance Commons, and we're happily collaborating. And, you know, we don't really have to put everything into Chips Alliance Commons to be collaborating with things, but it would be a nice nod if we could get some projects to do that. But yeah, we have to test that in like battle test that.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it here. Really, is just for the first few times through, we just want to make sure that we're doing something that is sustainable and that we're capturing all the different aspects of information that we need here. Yeah, in this case, we're just basically saying TSC can maintain a list of strategic open source projects or include them in the relevant discussions. So I think, you know, let's go through one or two here, proposing some lists of relevant projects and see how that works.
Cool.
Yeah. I think the only place that we'd want to be somewhat cautious here is just in the way that this is communicated, because I think for the folks who are involved in this process, you know, we kind of have an idea of what the Chips Alliance Commons should be. You know, this is not these projects are not part of the Chips Alliance. They are related to the Chips Alliance. They are cooperative, and there's a sense that, you know, that they're occupying a similar space and are important to each other. But we'll want to make sure that we communicate that clearly so that other people don't come away with the wrong impression. That, you know, for example, a Commons project is the same as a graduated project, or even a sandbox project for that matter. So I think that's probably the main thing that I think we need to just double check as we go through this, is the way that we message this.
Yep.
Yep.
I'd prioritize the stuff we're doing with real projects now and the work group stuff, and like the Commons is something we should be like thinking about, but like I wouldn't be pushing for like making this our priority number one.
Yeah, I would call it the family and friends program.
Yeah, kind of.
So
that's what was meant. Yeah. I think the name was suggested by Brian, but
that's a more better sounding name than family and friends. But anyway,
right. But at the same time, I mean, you raise a good point. It's important for us to have casual language that can help other people understand what this is, if they're looking at it at a glance, so we don't send out the wrong impression to anybody.
Yeah, I was just saying that just because trying to make it in a friendly fashion that would welcome different groups without necessarily having to going through any formal processes, so to speak, at least initially.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have anything else to add to the agenda unless anybody else has anything.
No, that was good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm good.
Okay, Henry, you want to call us to a close?
Yep, I hereby declare the meeting adjourned.
All right. Very good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.